So what you're going to do is you're going to take your left hand low putting grip, which is a little weaker than your standard grip, more rotated to the left, and you're going to use that for your chipping grip. So it's a little more palmy and it's more rotated to the left. Then you're going to take your right hand and cover the thumb. That puts both hands in a weaker position, but specifically it allows you to use a little less wrist action because this left wrist is more in the palm. And the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to just stand in a little bit closer to the ball. So if we looked at it from this viewpoint, it's going to be, let's say, roughly a foot's width. Now what that also does is it raises the heel slightly off the ground. So that's important for you because you said sometimes the club gets a little sticky or it gets a little stuck in the ground, especially if we've got a little bit of like an uphill lie and we're into the grain, which we have here. Raising it up with a little less wrist action, both those are going to take away some of the steepness. And it's really going to take away your ability to use like too much wrist. So for these simple ones where you're just landing the ball 2 yards, 5 yards, 3, 4, whatever, it's just going to allow you to be a lot more passive with the wrists. And basically it's going to allow this part of the club to be striking into the ground more so than this part. And with less wrist action, you're going to have less lean, which again is going to take out some of that sticky contact. So it just allows you to be more consistent with these shots overall, I would say, with the contact. And the other cool thing is, like if I just put the ball in that little divot there and I kicked it down, which is a little tricky, if again you're coming in with too much wrist action, you're kind of this way before, the club again could potentially get too stuck. There's also way too much speed going on. So if I, again, raise the heel up, get pretty close to it, it's way easier to get the club to kind of glide through that lie. Absolutely. Yeah, you got it. So more palmy. And when you raise when you get in a little closer, which I suggested, even gripping down a touch, and then it's going to force you to get closer and taller. There we go. Now we have feeling, and it even looks like it, of this heel. It's almost like I could slide a little credit card under there. You know what I mean? Like you're not kind of down in this position as much. So again, for these basic ones, it gives you a lot more play as far as how the club's kind of moving through the ground. Absolutely. Whereas before it was kind of long, loose looking, wristy looking. I'm not saying that's necessarily a poor thing, but do you actually need it in this situation where you got tight, you don't really have that much fairway ground to cover? We're trying to kind of simplify the shot and not trying to make it so complicated. I'd also say when I'm looking at the backstroke that you're making there, it's more under control. And I'd say it's much less because there's less wrist action. You've got a very neutral low point, so you're not hitting down on these chip shots too much. Now there is some downward attack for sure, but when you add all that wrist action and your hands are quite low, that kind of almost encourages too much chopping into the ball. So I've taken some of that away and really just left what you do naturally. As I mentioned, what we're developing here is pretty much a stock shot. It's a shot that I would say you can use in a lot of different situations. We've got a mid-trajectory, balls middle to back, but nothing too crazy. We've got a nice mid-trajectory, a little downhill. But what we could say with a 50 degree, it's probably carrying 30, 40% in the air and rolling 60, maybe even getting close to 50-50 the way you play it. So I would say that's a good baseline. What I'm going to do now is go around the green. And let's do this. No matter what the situation, we're going to use this shot. Just see what adjustments we have to make in carry. Perhaps do we have to land it a little further on the green? Do we have to land it sometimes like short of the green to get it there? And I'll just see how you do with that. We'll go through some decision making. And then what we're going to do is manipulate this club a little bit. Open it a touch, see how you deal with that. Close it a touch, see how you deal with that. Do you normally use other clubs around the green? Or it's mainly 50? Okay.
Unless if I have a shot back there, I'll use it.
Okay, when you've got to elevate it a lot more. Okay. So let's look at shots where you don't have to do anything too extreme, and we only have to use slight variations in this. But for now, let's just use our stock shot, and we'll just go through situations like we did before. Yeah, I think that'll be good.